Welcome to episode 26 of the 15-Minute Coffee Podcast with Brandon Salazar, your go-to destination for expert perspectives and valuable insights from the world of business. On today's double interview episode, I'm here with Sophia Haber Brock, a global e-commerce and digital content intern at BIC and host of SGHB TV podcasts. All right, let's get started. Tell us about who you are and introduce yourself and what you do.
Well, first of all, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for asking me to do this. So we have a mutual friend, actually, my friend Natalie from high school, and she goes to Rider University, so it's exciting to get to chat. Um, okay, so obviously I'm
Shout
so
out Natalie. Shout out Natalie. I know
okay.
she's gonna love that.
But yeah. Okay, so I'm Sophia Haber Brock. I'm a rising junior at Fairfield University, and I'm passionate about videography, video journalism, and media content creation. Um, like Brandon said, I have a podcast that I've run for the last 5, 6 years called SGHB TV. I interview professionals and celebrities about their passions and how they found success in their respective job. Um, and yeah, I've created a lot of video content. I've had some internships with the Stress Factory Comedy Club. I did their social media and broadcasting, and also worked in the sound booth. And I worked for the local government in my town in communications. And yeah, now I'm working at BIC, which it's not BIC, it's BIC, but nice try.
I have no
Uh,
idea why I said it like that, to be
so
honest,
no
but
worries. Um, but yeah, I work for BIC in global e-commerce and digital content. So I support the creation of content for Amazon. If you find BIC on Amazon, that's what my team does. So yeah, I'm just really passionate about content creation and storytelling through video. And yeah, that's what I
so
love to do.
yeah, so you talk about your podcast. So have you ever used that as like a talking point in like an interview? Because I know whenever I tell someone I have a podcast first, like it's like a strange look because if you really know me, it's like not my persona that fits like someone who interviews people. I'm very much of a quiet kid, very into like computers. So how do you use that as a talking point to get like, or if you do use it as a talking point?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's really cool that you have a podcast and it's like kind of outside of your immediate realm, because then it just adds, like, another layer, and, like, I feel like you learn so much from podcasting too, but that's another thing we'll talk about, but, yeah, I definitely so you're asking how I bring it up, or
Yeah, how is it mentioned as a talking point that yeah, I do have
yeah,
podcasts. This is what I've learned
um,
skills.
that's a good question. Well, I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to create my pitch, like, kind of like my personal brand identity. That's something, like, I'm working on developing right now. Um, but I kinda just talk about it like it's my little company in a way, even though it's not, like, an official company, which hopefully I'll eventually make it into, like, an LLC or something like that. That's, like, what I'm projecting to do, to make, like, SGHB TV my brand and then have, like, shows underneath that, like interview shows and segments and stuff like that. But yeah, I kind of just bring it up. That's like, well, you could see on my LinkedIn, that's like the first thing in my LinkedIn bio right after that I'm a student. So that's like, I've just had it for such a long time, and it's like kind of like my baby and like what I'm really passionate about doing. And it's just, I've been interviewing people since I was like in middle school, and I've just always had a knack for like storytelling and just being inquisitive about people and like caring about why people care about things. And that's really why I love to do it. So yeah, I just
Was
kind
this
of bring it up in conversation.
was it something that just came natural to you, like podcasting? Was it something like, wow, I really just am passionate about that?
Um, yeah, I feel like, I mean, obviously I've grown so much, like we were talking about before, like from my first interview that I did, it's so different than the conversations that I have now. Like I feel like it did come naturally to me in a sense that like I had the natural drive to like reach out to people and like want to be on camera and want to just chat with people and ask them about their lives. But I've definitely grown a lot through those like the intricate skills. But yeah, I actually started in doing a lot of musical theater and like singing on stage. So I always had that natural like I wanna be on stage, I wanna be the star type thing, so I've always liked to be, like, on camera, because I went from stage onto, like, kind of TV acting a bit, like, on screen, and that's how I got into the behind the scenes of it, of video production, and then I got into interviewing, so, it was kinda like a progression of all my passions in, like, media and communication. It just was like a natural journey.
And so, based off your podcasts, what would be the most profound thing you've learned from a guest?
That's a really good question. Um, so thing that I've learned from the guests or from doing it in general?
I would honestly say both because just from learning from having a podcast and something you've learned from a guest that was like, wow, that's a great point.
Yeah. Um, from the guests, I mean, I've learned that we were kind of chatting about this before we started recording too, but like everyone tells a story in such a different way. Um, and that's really interesting. Like some people are more reflective about their journeys and some people are more very like informative, like, oh, this is what happened and this and we went to this. But then some people are more like think more deeply about their experiences, I guess, and, like, how they grew as a person. Like, when I ask about these professional experiences, some people connect things more to their personal experience and, like, their friends and their family and, like, their thought process versus others just, like, the facts, like I'm saying. Um, but yeah, that's something I've definitely learned and just, like, how to have a flowing conversation too. I feel like in the beginning, a lot of it was just writing questions and then kind of just reading them and, like, not even giving, like, answers in between, like, 'cause what I've realized, it's like, you really have to make it a conversation, and that's what makes your guests more comfortable and, like, you connect with them more because that's really important to me, like, I love to like, when I go on Zoom with someone, I wanna, like, create a friend, like, create a connection with someone, so I realized that can't just be, like, reading questions and things are not gonna flow that easily, like, there's gonna be questions that you'll just come up with in your head that someone might say something like a really cute anecdote about something and you want to learn more about that. So that's a really important thing that just people tell stories differently and like conversations really have to flow. But yeah,
Oh, I get what you mean with that because that was my problem in the beginning of just like almost talking like a robot. And I was actually told by some of my guests, respectfully, of course, because I've known them for a while. They're like, Brandon, you have to stop reading off the script. It's very, very visible.
yeah,
You're not like that. Just talk how you usually talk. Don't be too nervous about it. I mean, and when I took that into factor, it really helped because it just goes naturally. And the way that you execute it is definitely important because reading off the script is only good for a certain amount of time, and then actual conversations have to happen. So that was a great point.
yeah, totally.
And then, uh, what would be your best piece of career advice that you think would help someone aspiring for success in the field of podcasting?
Um, that's a good question too. I'd say I think a really good piece of advice is to not be afraid to just reach out to people and just ask for what you want, and I feel like a lot of times you're gonna get no's or no responses, but you might as well reach out to them because you never know, and if there's I feel like the people that I reached out to, I didn't know that they were gonna respond to me, and then I got such a nice connection and conversation out of it, um, so, yeah, I'd just say reach out to everyone, and you never know who you could talk to and what you can learn from people. And even if it's like the biggest star in the world, you stay persistent, you keep reaching out to them, but you gotta balance between being annoying and you know what I mean? Like you can't be annoying and pester them, but you wanna be persistent and, have tenacity and stuff, and that's, like, something I really value about myself is that I have determination to, like, just and I don't have, like, fear to, like, text someone or, like, DM them or email them, I just, like, do it, and you can make really great connections out of that. And,
Uh,
one more thing, I think, like, reflecting and, like, evaluating yourself is really important. I think, like, obviously, you're gonna watch your footage if you're editing your own videos, but I think or like editing your own audio if you're just doing an audio podcast, but I think taking notes on how you are doing and like critiquing yourself and like growing from that. Like if you're watching or listening to yourself and you're like, oh, I wish I asked that, or oh, I wish that I wasn't saying like and so much, or I wish I like stood up straighter and I wasn't slouching. Like take into account those little things that you do that because you'll realize once you do a few interviews that you have like certain little things that you do. Like I say like and a lot. I slouch sometimes. Like these are things that I know that I do, like I'm aware of it and like I'm able to bring that into my next interview and hope that I fix it. Like it's a constant growing process. And I feel like I take that into my life too. Like not only with podcasting, just in like every aspect of my life. I'm always trying to like reflect on my experience and get better as a person.
I see what you mean there because my problem has always been, it still is, like focusing. So I'll be focusing like 80 to 90% of the time on the podcast. The other 20%, I don't know, but
I
that
totally
leads
get
with,
that, I totally get
yeah.
that. Like, I have, so in my high school, I used to host the school's news, and I would go on, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the word, but I would go to these places and do interviews with people, like, on different sets and different on location. Um, but I would go and I would be like, I would ask my question, then I would hold the microphone to their mouth, and I would in some of the videos, I just look so uninterested. And I'm like, why would I do that? Like it looks so bad on camera. But it's like you do have to kind of like keep in your mind, like, okay, I need to be looking at this person, I need to be listening. Like it's kind of like you do have to like train yourself a little bit, but like once you like train yourself, it's much easier to like just keep focused, you know? And like even just like I find doing a lot of research before too, like getting if I like learn a lot about something, like I'll get passionate about it. And if I get passionate about it, I'll want to know more and like ask more questions. So like I really like when I interview someone, I like to do like real research and like ask questions that like a lot of people don't ask, like not just like the basic ones, but I like to ask deeper questions about like how people think or like about specific experiences and like that gets me excited to like know the answer and like once I hear that answer, like I'm more likely to think of more exciting questions because I know so much about them, you know? So I think that's like I know I went off on a little tangent, but yeah, it's a funny thing to watch myself when I'm like I'm like so not interested, but it's just like all part of the process and you're learning and it's kind of hi everyone. So now we're gonna flip over and I'm gonna interview Brandon. So I'm joined by Brandon Salazar. He is the founder of CycleVend, his startup, and the host of the 15-minute coffee podcast. So I'm excited to be asking you some questions now after you asked me. So you have your podcast. Why did you start your podcast? And especially like we chatted in when you asked me questions, why did you start this podcast, even though it's not exactly what you want to do with your life? Like you want to get into coding and some things that are not so directed to that. So why the podcast?
Yeah, so that's actually an amazing question that I kind of want to tell every time my guests every time I do it because they won't believe me. But I'll start with simple reason. So honestly, I didn't have homework one weekend and I decided to do something different. And it kind of stemmed from the fact that one of my mentors told me I should set up a coffee chat with a recruiter. And that somehow that kind of stems to the fact that I should probably do that with more than just recruiters and maybe expand that to my network of people that I have and know and could just utilize the networking and the connections I have with them. So I kind of just started this. Honestly, I had no homework that weekend. I just started it.
Well, I love that. It's so casual, but it's honestly such a good idea to just record those informational meetings that you have with cool people with cool jobs. Like, why not, you know, and make content and teach other people. Like, that's honestly very similar. Like, now that I'm learning more about the networking side of it, like, I realize I've been networking since I was in middle school and I didn't even know it, you know, like setting up informationals with people, but just recording it. And like, it's such a good idea. So
That's my
definitely
point. And
give you
then you have to
props for that.
yeah, utilize it. So my point was I wasn't utilizing it as much. So like the fact that I utilized my podcast, I get recommendations from my guests typically. I get just a great connection, like personal wise, with the guests I have. Like I reach out to them often. I actually one of my guests I'm actually doing a meeting with because he's a recruiter. So that's another great opportunity to get out of this.
Yeah, that's super cool. And, like, especially, like, I see that a lot of your guests are, like, big companies, like, people who work for big companies that, like, you could totally have a career in eventually if you're interested in, like, coding and stuff, so, like, that's so perfect that you're doing that, like, very smart.
Thank you.
Um, so why? Because I know that you're involved in a lot and, like, it seems like you are a high achiever in a sense, like, you wanna be doing great things and doing them really well. Why do you think that you're like that? Is that something that you've always had since you were young, or isn't that something that you've developed over the years?
So yeah, that's a great question. I've always been like, and for better words, like different. I wasn't like really too smart grade wise. Like I would get 80s, 90s, but I was never like satisfied with the fact of just simple things. I would always like constantly keep challenging myself. I still always like desire just more challenging things, just constantly learning. So I kind of figured that like I have to find something that I'm going to do. I'm going to go crazy. So like I do something like a podcast, I have a startup. It's just like the need to constantly challenge myself has it's what's been really driving me since I've remembered, like, since I've been young.
Yeah, that's cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like we have very similar traits in that way. Like we have this drive to do something different and like try new things and explore and learn about things. I think that's like a really important quality of like having a podcast and just like interviewing people in general. So I definitely see that. I like that we can relate on that
Yeah,
because I feel like interviewing, especially at our age, it's kind of like a very niche thing. Like people have podcasts, but it's like a lot of adults and like people with platforms already. So I think it's a really cool thing to tap into as a student and someone who's young.
yeah, it's a great way to show my professional side as much as I am professional and also not professional. It's great to
Yeah,
show that side of just being able to effectively communicate with like executives and
yeah.
people that are changing the world.
Mhm. Yeah, and yeah, so it is so cool that and it's a great balance between that personal and professional, like, the communication and, like, you can also throw a bit of your personality in there too, like, once you get comfortable and, like, it's such a fun balance to play with, and sometimes it's difficult too, like we were saying before, but yeah. Well, and you asked me what is something profound that I learned. What is something profound that you've learned through this experience so far? And how do you see yourself grow too? Like, what's something huge that you didn't have before you started the podcast that you have now?
Profound experience that I've somewhat learned from this is that if you're going to do something, do it right, do it, make sure you're the best or one of the best, and think strategically. So anything that you do, from getting the person on the podcast strategically, you have to strategically introduce yourself, tell them what you want out of this connection, provide the details sufficiently to them. You have really one shot to get it if it's a high up person, and just strategically with how you carry out things, how you utilize what time you have with them to make the best out of it. If they're willing to go sit with you again and talk just about career things, not regarding to the podcast, if they actually want to get to know you as a person, I think that's just great to actually get out of this.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I feel like you learn so much from this, and even though it seems like just a simple conversation, I feel like there's so much that goes into a podcast, like the preparation, the conversation, the after. Like, I feel like you just learn so much and can grow so much as a person from it. So it's great. Um, and also final like as a final question, how do you keep yourself organized and balanced with all of your responsibilities? Like hosting this podcast, reaching out to people, doing the startup, school, and stuff like that.
Um, I don't know how to answer that, but I'll answer it to the best of my ability because I honestly just I don't believe in like not finding a way. So like whenever I do something, 90% of the time I try to find a way, or if I don't find a way, I'll find a way. Like as dumb as that sounds, like if I don't have enough time to do podcasts a certain day and I need to get that podcast on, the odds are that I'm gonna get the podcast done because I just don't like let myself accept failure like that. So like, but balancing, it was definitely difficult because it was towards the end of the year of finals when I just started doing like a lot of podcasts. But I would find time, like instead of like going, as dumb as this sounds again, but going to get lunch with friends, going to get lunch, I'll dedicate that time to the podcast. And that's kind of just how I went about it.
Mm. And do you schedule yourself let me reset that. do you schedule yourself very strictly, or like do you have a Google Calendar and like you block your time, or is it kind of like whenever things fit in? How do you balance that?
Yeah, so I have like a notebook that I actually just carry with me all the time. Ironically, I don't have it with me right this second, but just every day, what I would do every day. I always have something to do every day, either meetings, work, just having to do a certain fill out an application form for like a job I'm trying to get. I just write everything down there to be honest. And I typically never forget anything. I've probably forgotten like one or two events in my life that I've had it, but it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I always like to ask people how they keep themselves balanced and organized because that's something I'm definitely playing with. Like, I have a lot of involvement and like I like how we're both very involved and we want to do a lot of things, but sometimes it can get tricky with like managing everything and time management and stuff like that. So that's cool. Like, it's honestly, there's not one right way to do it, but it's like what works for you.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. And to the fact of having many things, I learned this from my economics teacher, is that everything's an opportunity cost. And if you want to go to this event, but this event A and event B are at the same time, but event A is going to provide this and event B is going to provide that, and you really want to go to event A, but event B is going to provide something better in the long run, it's all an opportunity cost in an economic term. So you have to weigh what's going to be better. Like you're literally weighing what's going to be better, short term and long term. So that's honestly how I go about things.
mm, that's cool. Yeah, I like how it's a very systematic way of thinking, like a formula. I
Yeah,
very much like formulas, even though it kind of sucks that a lot of things are not to a formula, but
that
that's
is a
nice.
hard truth.
Yeah. But that's cool that you found that and like, do you find it easy to prioritize, you'd say?
Um, yes, because I'm very cold hearted. Because like if
Really?
something like is even slightly less more important to me and I have something else to do, I honestly don't have any emotion towards it. I don't keep any emotional strings towards it. I do what I need to do best. Obviously, family comes first. I do what I then family comes first, then I do what I need to do to help myself in life. So
Mm,
that's how I think about it.
that's cool. Sounds like you have your priorities really strong, and that's a very admirable thing, especially as a young person. Because I know I struggle with that sometimes, but yeah, that's really cool. And it's
Thank
so
you.
amazing everything that you're doing, and I'm really impressed by you. And yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Thanks.